Hey everyone. Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, just
Okay. So Toria is getting severe thunderstorms. Oh my gosh, that sounds scary, but I hope that you're okay. And yeah, if you cut out, no big deal. Welcome everyone. To those of you who haven't had me as a teacher before, my name is Carly Heath, and I usually can be found teaching the DES 104 Photoshop class. But here we are in intermediate Photoshop DES 323, which means that you guys made it successfully through a lot of the 100 level classes. So that means I can count on you guys to be really good students, right? So you know the ins and outs of deadlines and things of that nature. So for this class and for all of your classes, our assignments each week are due on Sunday, and our discussions are due on Wednesday. So what I would recommend you guys do is, if you have not yet done your discussion, make sure that your discussion is in by Wednesday. And here's my feelings on late work and things of that nature. As long as you reach out to me before the deadline, letting me know that your work is going to be late for some reason, that you're dealing with personal issues, that you have health issues, that you have computer issues, I will be more than happy to give you extra days on your assignments. I won't take off points, just as long as you communicate with me ahead of time. But if I don't see you submitting your work, and if, I have to reach out to you and say, hey, what's going on? Because I'm going to be worried. I'm like, are they in a ditch somewhere? Are they on the side of the road? With their legs missing? I don't know. Whatever disasters can go down. Oh, and if you hear some little dog fighting, that's my little chihuahuas in the background being funny. So as long as you let me know, I will be happy to give you extensions as needed, okay? And as long as also you don't, and that's Jackson back there. He did that last class too. He's like, I'm gonna make an appearance, and what he's gonna do is he's just gonna lick the pillow, because that's what he did. Don't lick the pillow. Don't lick the pillow. So that's Jackson. And so let me know if your work is going to be late, but don't abuse the privilege. Don't abuse my generosity by making every single assignment be an assignment that you're going to be turning in late, right? Because that also doesn't help you either, because Jackson, oh my gosh, he's just like, I need to lick the pillow. There we go. Don't do that. So because it also benefits you to get things turned in on time, because it can be very stressful when you're trying to make up multiple assignments at the same time, right? So it's just better to just get them in on time. And I know that things are difficult right now. Some of you are working a whole lot because of the pandemic situation. Some of you are not working at all. Some of you have family obligations and stuff. And I'm totally willing to work with you. My goal is for each and every one of you to come out of this class with an A, and I'm on your side. I'm rooting for you. And the assignments in this course are actually pretty easy. So as long as you come to our class sessions, watch my demonstration where I demonstrate step by step how to do your assignments. Take actual notes on a piece of paper, napkin, toilet paper, junk mail, whatever you have to write on. Write down your notes. And then after this class session is over, you will be able to look at your notes while you're doing your work on the computer, and you look at your notes like this, do your computer work, and it makes it so much easier. Now, I know there's some students who like to watch the video and then follow along on their own screen, and I just don't, I really strongly think, and studies show that that's not the best way to learn, because the act of writing things down makes the information go in your brain. And also when you're watching me and when you're watching your screen and doing this, you miss steps. It always happens. The students who are trying to follow along while I'm doing the demo are like, wait, I missed a step. Why isn't it working for me? Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, you missed a step because you're looking at your screen and not my screen. So look at my screen, take notes, write down the notes, and I'm going to speak slowly and explain what steps you need to write down, and then you'll be able to have them. Okay? And yeah, and the other cool thing about having notes is, as Taria mentioned, you can go back to the recording if there's a part that you get stuck on, and then fill in the gap. So if you're looking at your notes and then you're trying to do it and there's a part that you're stuck on, you can just go back to the recording, watch that one part again, and then you're good to go. Okay? And you guys, I really think you're going to love this class. Photoshop is so fun. But I know that, we've only had 4 weeks of Photoshop prior to this. We aren't Photoshop experts by any means in this class, and that's okay. And that's why I'm going to explain things very slowly and review the information that you need to know so that everyone gets it and everyone's on the same page. And I'm also happy to make myself available at times that are convenient for you. Just feel free to text me or email me, and I can meet with you one-on-one over Zoom. But don't be overwhelmed by anything. Okay, and give me I just want to kind of get a sense of where everyone is at with the Photoshop stuff. So in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being like really bad, 5 being like I feel really good and proficient, how do you feel about Photoshop on a scale of 1 to 5? Okay, one person's a 5, one person's a 3. Cool. So you're all fairly confident. That's good to hear. Excellent. So we're going to get through this no problem. And so what we're going to be doing this week is, we're going to talk briefly about the color modes. That might be brought up in the quiz or your discussions. I'm not quite sure, but we'll be discussing them. And we're going to be talking about masking, because we're going to make something called a cinematograph, which is a type of animated GIF that is mostly still, except for one small section of the animated GIF will move. And we're going to be learning how to create custom shapes. I think that's something that's covered in your quiz this week. We're going to be learning about blending modes. We're going to use layers and clipping masks and video animation editing features to make our animated GIF. So here's the strategy that most students use in order to be successful. So do what you're doing now, which is come to the live class session and watch our class. Take notes, right? Write down the notes as I explain them. Then on your own, after the class session recording on Tuesday, do the assignment on your own. And then on Friday, we're going to have our second class session. And the Friday class session is a chance for you to share your work, get feedback, and get a critique on it before you turn it in. And also Friday's a good time to go over any problems or difficulties or areas that you might have gotten stuck on after trying to do it on your own on Tuesday. And then turn in your work on Friday or Saturday, even though the deadline is Sunday. But it's a good idea to not get in the habit of turning things in late all the time. Or because especially in week 4 where things all have to be in, it's a good idea to get in the habit of turning in things early so that you don't have any last minute surprises, right? So if you turn in your work on Friday or Saturday, you can kick back and enjoy your Sunday, right? A lot less stress. And I'm going to reiterate it a bunch of times. Take notes actually with a pen or a pencil on actual paper, because studies show that this is the way that the information goes into your brain. And it makes it so much easier to refer to your notes as you're following along on your own in Photoshop. And if you don't have a piece of paper or a pen or a pencil, this is a good time to go get one now. And then we're going to be diving into your assignment and your discussion and your assessment very, very soon. So before getting into our assignment, we're going to talk briefly about your discussion. And your discussion this week is asking you to think about a job that you might be hired to do as a graphic designer that would involve photo compositing. Photo compositing is the way, we learned this in week 3 of DES 104. It's the way that we cut out multiple photographs from their backgrounds and then combine them onto original compositions. So think of what is a job that would involve photo compositing, or even just a scenario or a task. Okay, when would photo compositing be required? And then think about also, where do you decide the line is going to be drawn between false representation and, you know, the mood or the feeling that you want to convey in an advertisement? Now, please keep in mind that we're talking about photo compositing. Photo compositing is combining 2 or more photo elements together into a composition. And photo compositing is not beauty retouching, okay? So we're gonna have another week where we talk specifically about beauty retouching. This is photo compositing, where we're combining 2 or more images together. So what's a situation in your graphic design career where you'll need to employ photo compositing? And how can photo compositing lead to a false representation or, you know, deception or anything of that nature? So I'm going to just briefly switch over to showing you the design inspiration. This is a great website to go to for inspiration related to graphic design, and there's a lot of Photoshop stuff. And Creative Photos is a great place to go as well. So we're going to click View All Photos, because this is where we'll see a lot of photo compositing. And so here is an example of photo compositing. And this shows sort of like a floating world with waterfalls falling off of it, and buildings and trees and clouds in the background. And this is something that you might see, and he even has a San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge in there. So this is something that you might see on like a book cover design, right? Or a movie poster, or like a fantastical website, right? Now, a case where it would be false advertising is if this image were used to advertise, let's say, a resort. Well, if people, I mean, people would probably have to be pretty, not bright, to actually think that this place actually exists. But let's say there was a website and a series of advertisements for a floating resort in the sky. And photo compositing was used to create that floating resort in the sky. Well, obviously that would be false advertising, right? because this place doesn't actually exist. And if people call up or book and make their reservations, they're going to be pretty disappointed when they find out that this place that they booked their reservations on doesn't actually exist, right? So that's an example where photo compositing can be really good if you're doing something fantastical like this. But if you're trying to represent something that's actually real, that could be deceptive. There's so many, well, I just seen so many Photoshop things that people are sharing that are like, oh, wow, look at this real thing. And I'm like, that's Photoshop. That's not a real thing. Like, you know, what are you guys doing? Like there's a, oh, what was it? There was something like with an animal. It was like a, oh gosh, I forget what it was. But oh, there was an animal thing going around. It was like a black rooster painted all black and black eggs. And they're like, ooh, look at this new breed of chicken that's all black and lays black eggs. And I'm like, first, that's a rooster. Second, that breed of chicken doesn't exist. That was created with Photoshop. There's also like a all black lion that was a clearly Photoshop thing that was going around. And I'm like, that's not real. That's definitely a Photoshop lion. So this is another example of photo compositing, right? This might be, a conceptual work of art that, it might be for like a book or for a fashion something or other. It's very fantastical, maybe even like a play or a movie. But if they were advertising like a place that actually has underwater pyramids that you can ride to with camels, that would be an example of false advertising. Okay. So that's what you're talking about in your discussion this week. Pretty straightforward. I gave you some ideas to talk about, but please don't confuse photo compositing with beauty retouching or beauty restoration. Like people like to always go straight to body modification, like using the liquify tool to make people look skinnier, or the blemish removal tools to make people's skin look perfect. That's not what we're talking about. We are going to be talking about that in a future week, but what we're specifically talking about is photo compositing. And make sure that your original post is made by Wednesday and your additional posts are made by Sunday. And your main post should be 200 words or more, and you'll include 2 APA citations. So this is a little bit more advanced than the 100 level classes. You're asked to do a little bit more in your discussions. And you are going to be still holding to the rule that 80% of your discussion is your own original opinion and analysis, and no more than 20% is your quotes or paraphrased information from outside sources. So that translates to about 160 words of your discussion board post should be your own original opinion and analysis. And then 40 words can be quotes or paraphrased information from outside sources supporting your thesis. So for example, this week you might go on the internet and find a quote about what photo compositing is, defining photo compositing, and that might be one source. And then your second quote that you can find could be like a specific artist talking about their process for making a specific design and the tools they used. And then the 160 other words of your discussion board post are going to be about, what your opinions are on, how these tools can be used, what constitutes, false representation, that sort of thing. So we need to do a slight refresher on compositing in order to do our animated GIF that we're making this week. So I'm going to do a quick little refresher on our basic masking and compositing tools. These will be on the quiz, so it's important for you to have this information. And then I'm going to demonstrate how to use these compositing tools when making a animated GIF that shows only a certain part of the picture moving. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. And by the way, there's a chance that you guys might have a slightly more updated version of Photoshop than I do. And if that's the case, you will see on your layer panel, instead of the little square with a triangle in the corner that represents the new layer icon, you'll have just a square with a plus sign inside of it. So that's pretty much the only difference. And also, if you were to use the gradients, your gradients are neatly organized into little folders. And you just click on the sideways arrow to access the different gradients. And then your shape layers are slightly different. Your shapes in your library, in your custom shape library, you have some different ones than I do. No big deal. We can still do all the same stuff. Those are the only differences between your version of Photoshop and mine. So now I'm gonna just briefly make a new document. And we'll just do a basic document that's nice and small. I hate that I put an artboard there. I'm gonna redo it without the artboard. I hate the artboard. So I'm gonna go File, New. And you guys, by the way, I'm not saying take notes on this part because I'm assuming you guys know how to make a new document. But if you don't know how to make a new document, this is a good time to write this down to refresh your memory. To make a new document in Photoshop, you go to File at the top of the screen, select New, and then in this area here, you're going to put in the sizes that you want. And in this case, the width is going to be 7 inches. Make sure it's inches, not pixels, because if you had it 7 pixels, it would be way, way, way too small. Height 5, again, that's inches, and then resolution 72. Okay, there's my nice little document. And at 100%, it's very small. So we're going to use a shortcut key that hopefully you guys are familiar with, but if you're not, write this down. Command plus sign increases the size of the document. Command plus. Now we're going to place a picture on this document. So again, if you are unfamiliar with how to place images on a document, this is a good thing to write down to refresh yourself. You go to File, Place Embedded. File, Place Embedded. And now I'm just going to find a image in my documents. Hit Place. To resize something, you just click on the corners and drag it at a diagonal angle, and then hit Enter, Return. Okay, so now we have this image on our document. And what we want to do, oops, sorry, let me adjust my microphone. And what we want to do is cut this object out of its background by making a hole in that picture layer. Okay. Sorry, I just had to reorder things here. So we have our layer panel that has our background layer and our flower layer. And what we want to do to start cutting out the flower is make a selection of the flower. And one of the easiest ways to make a selection is to get the quick selection tool out. And then newer versions of Photoshop have this button here that says select subject. Select subject. So often you can just hit select subject up at the top of the screen, and the object will automatically be selected for you. As you can see though, there are some limitations with the select subject because it couldn't tell whether the leaf or the flower was part of the subject. So we need to fix and adjust our selection. And the quick selection tool, which is the brush that has the dotted little circle behind it, has 3 options up at the top of the screen: add to selection, subtract from selection, and new selection. If we hit subtract from selection, we can bring our cursor to the edge of these dotted lines, and we can push those dotted lines inward, right? So I don't want to have this leaf part of my selection, so I'm going to click out here and I'm going to push this selection inward because I'm telling it, nope, I don't want that leaf. But I do want this petal selected. So I'm going to get out my Add to Selection button, which is found at the top of the screen. Click inside of my selection and push it out. See, I got a little bit of that leaf still. So I'm going to go to the Subtract from Selection icon and then push this in. Alrighty, so now we have a nice clean selection of our flower. And we've made this using the quick selection tool, which is the paintbrush with the kind of dotted circle behind it. And then I'm going to go over to the layer panel. And at the bottom of the layer panel, there's a square with a circle inside of it that has the Add a Layer Mask option. And I can click on the Add Layer Mask icon. And then I've cut that flower out of that background. Now, as you can see, there are limitations to the quick selection tool because some of my edges on my subject are very pixelated. So another tool that is probably better for a subject that's like this flower, which has smooth curves and straight lines, is the pen tool. And by now you've probably had DES 103, where you learned the pen tool and how to use it. And so the pen tool is a great tool for objects like this flower that have smooth curves and straight lines. So the way the pen tool works is you make sure that you're on the path mode. So up at the top of the screen, make sure path is selected. And then try to stay inside the bounds of the flower. Oh, we have a pen tool lover. So Amber, you like the pen tool. A lot of people don't like the pen tool. That's great. And if you enjoy the pen tool, it will serve you well. Oh, Amber. Perfect. So what we do with the pen tool is when we stay inside of the bounds of the flower. Don't go into the outside, and we outline almost done. So see how we curve in the direction of the flower? Ah, John likes the pen tool when he uses his Wacom. Yep, I'm just using a trackpad, my fingers on a trackpad. Clicking and dragging, almost done. The cool thing about objects that have smooth curves is that you don't have to get the edge perfect. If you cut out too much, it's okay, no one will know. Okay, so now I have completely enclosed the flower with the path I drew using the pen tool. And now what I do is I go up to the top of the screen and click the Make Selection button up at the top of the screen, the Make Selection. Then I click OK. And now we have this nice selection. And then when I'm ready to make a mask, I go down to the bottom of the layer panel, click on the square with a circle inside of it. And ta-da, we've cut this out. So see now how this version of the flower selection is a lot smoother and cleaner than the quick selection tool. The quick selection tool was certainly easy to use, but it makes that jagged pixelated edge. It's very kind of quick and dirty. It's like a quick and dirty selection. It's good for things like coloring, but if you want like a really nice clean edge to your subject, and your subject is something that has smooth curves and straight lines, the pen tool is your way to go. Okay, so it's important to understand that you pick the appropriate tool for the thing that you are selecting. Now, for the purposes of our animated GIF that we're going to be making, we will most likely just be kind of painting our selection. And so the way that we paint a selection is we click on the layer that we want to mask, or the layer that we want to cut a hole in, as it were. And then we go down to the bottom of the layer panel and you click on the square with the circle inside of it. Then you go to the brush tool. And really important, when you're about to paint on a layer mask, it's essential that you make sure that you're painting with pure black and pure white. So that's why you want to hit the letter D on your keyboard before you start painting. D. D resets your foreground and background colors to pure black and pure white. And we want to be able to paint with black to cut our hole in our layer. So then you're going to hit the letter X on your keyboard. X toggles your foreground and background color. So write that down. X toggles your foreground and background color. And now you'll watch, I have my layer mask selected. That's this white square that has appeared next to my layer. And now I'm going to click on my document, and everywhere I start painting now, I'm cutting a hole in the layer. And we're seeing what's underneath. And so I could change the color of this, right? And we're seeing what is underneath. And if I want to bring back what I have cut out, I can click on my layer mask again, hit the letter X to start painting with white. And then as you can see, paint with white, paint with white, etc. X. And so it's so much better, of course, to mask than erase, because if you erase, you can't get back what you've erased. But if you mask, it's a thing that you can edit. It's like a stencil, and everything that's black on that stencil is being cut away and hidden, and everything white that's white is still there, okay? So that's painting on your mask. Let's now apply this to our animated GIF this week. By the way, anyone have any questions? I know I kind of buzzed through that pretty quickly, and I'll spend a little bit more time on masks and compositing, maybe towards the end of the class if we have more time, or on Friday. But I wanted to get into the assignment. Does anyone want me to repeat anything as far as masking or compositing goes? Okay. So here we are on our week 1 animated GIF. And what you've been given are a number of little videos. And what you're going to do is make a very short animated GIF, about 20 frames. And if you wanted to double it and have like a looping animation where the 20 frames are doubled, so I would say anywhere between 20 and 40 frames is fine. And we're going to make an animated GIF from this video. And let me see. I'm going to use this one. So you'll click on the link to download the video. And this is a little cinematograph or animated GIF I made. As you can see, it's basically a still picture with one part of the picture moving. And that's what we're going to be doing with these GIFs. So I've selected the video that I want to use for my animated GIF. And by the way, making an animated GIF is a really, really useful skill. You know, you see so many animated GIFs on social media, and you know, people want to hire social media managers who know how to make animated GIFs. So GIFs are certainly like a really important way that people communicate a lot on social media, right? So it's a good skill to learn. And they're used for, you know, advertisements, you know, book trailers, movie trailers. Animated GIFs are really important. Logos, animated logos. So what we're going to do is we're going to go File, Import, Video Frames to Layers. So at the top of your notes right now, you should write how to make an animated GIF. And step 1, after you downloaded the file, I'm just assuming that you guys know that you're supposed to download the file. But step 1, after you've downloaded the file, is go to File, Import, Video Frames to Layers. And when I take my notes, I just write it out just like that. I write the number 1, I circle it, and then I write File, and then I write a little arrow, and then I write the word Import, and then I draw another little arrow, and then I write Video Frames to Layers. Now I'm going to go to my downloads, and that is the video that I downloaded. And now I'm going to click open. This next part that shows up here, this next window that shows up, allows us to pick the specific part of the video that we want to use for our animated GIF. And it's going to be a very, very small amount of frames. So step 2 is you're going to move these little, I call them little half dome icons. See these little, what are the little teeth? I would just draw a picture of it in your notes, honestly. You're going to move these little teeth to the specific part of the video that you want to animate. And what I want, I'm trying to find a part where the dog is mostly still. And I think I just want to do that part where she's kind of blinking and turning like this. So I'm going to move the little half dome to just the part that I want. And see, it's just going to be like a real small part. So step 2 is move the little teeth to just the little part that you want to use. Make sure selected range only is selected, and then click OK. Now it looks like I got 10 frames. I got lucky. Some of you will accidentally select too many frames, and you'll have to figure out which ones you want to delete. So what I want my animation to do is I want her to, so it's going to go forward. And then I want her to bring her little head back. So she'll kind of look forward, blink, bring her head back. So that means I have to duplicate these frames and reorder them. So to duplicate them, step 3, I'm going to hold down the shift button and I'm going to select all my frames. Hold down the shift button and select all my frames. And then I'm going to hit step 4, Command J. And if you are on a PC, it's going to be Control J, okay? Command J if you're on a Mac, Control J if you're on a PC. And what that has done is it's duplicated my layers. And so layer 10, actually, I am going to go ahead and delete. Boop. Layer 9, copy. I'm going to bring down above layer 10. So your next step in your notes, I forget what step we're on, is we're going to reorder our frames, step 3. We're going to reorder our frames. So you're going to delete the top frame and then reorder the frames so that it looks like this. So how my layer panel is looking right now is layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, layer 5, layer 6, layer 7, layer 8, layer 9, layer 10, and then it goes to layer 9 copy, layer 8 copy, layer 7 copy, layer 6 copy, layer 5 copy, layer 4 copy, layer 3, layer 2, layer 1. So when I animate this, the dog is going to look forward, and then it's going to turn its head and go backwards again. It's going to play forward and backward. And as it sometimes happens with animated GIFs, sometimes you choose the perfect frames and it looks great as an animated GIF. And sometimes when you actually play it, you're like, oh gosh, I just chose the wrong frames. This is not looking good at all. I'm gonna have to start from scratch and redo it. So let's now, this will be step 5. Let's now see what this looks like when we animate it. So down at the bottom of your workspace, you'll see something that says timeline. Just double click on timeline. And if you don't see the word timeline down there, you go up to Window, and then you select timeline here. And that will bring up your timeline. Okay. So now that you have your timeline here, I'm gonna bring this up so that we can all see it. Make it nice and big. There we go. Bring it front and center. I believe this will be step 6. We want to delete the frames that it gave us. Step 6 is delete the frames, because this is just the original frames that came in when we animated. So step 6 is you're going to select all the frames by hitting Shift, holding down the Shift button and selecting them all and clicking on them all. And then you're going to click on the 4 little horizontal lines here. Click on the 4 little horizontal lines and then select delete animation, because we don't want the frames that came in when we imported the video. We want our frames brought in. And now I'm going to hold down the Shift button and select all the frames in my layer panel. So hold down the Shift button, select all the frames in your layer panel over here. And now you're going to click on the 4 horizontal lines again. And now you're going to click Make Frames from Layers. Make frames from layers. So this now has all of the layers that we put in the layer panel. And now we get to see if this is going to look like a total disaster or if it's going to look halfway decent. So to play it, I'm going to click on the little play animation icon, which is the sideways facing triangle. There we go. So the dog is blinking and turning her head. We can also make this play at a different speed. And sometimes the 0-second delay is a little bit too fast for an animated GIF, and just a little bit of a slower delay ends up being better. So to change the speed, hold down the Shift button, select all of the layers, and then after selecting, not all the layers, all the frames, hold down the Shift button, select all the frames, so they'll all be this kind of gray color, and then click on the downward facing arrow next to the time. And let's try 0.1 seconds. Now let's see what that looks like. So now it's a little bit slower. Okay. So this is a standard animated GIF, but this is an intermediate Photoshop class. So we want to do something that's a little bit more, let's say, challenging than a standard animated GIF. We want to make something called a cinematograph. And a cinematograph is a still photo that has one section of movement in it. And the way that we are going to add one section of movement is by adding a still frame at the top of our layer panel and then cutting a little hole in it. Okay? So what we need to do first is we need to select all our frames by holding down the shift button and selecting them. That way, this new frame that gets added is going to be applied to all of them. And then what I'm going to do is go to layer 1 copy, hit, go up to, so I'm at the very top of my layer panel. I've selected layer 1 copy, and I have all of my frames in my timeline selected. That's really important. All the frames in the timeline have to be selected first. Sarah's asking, could I do it individually if I wanted to highlight a certain frame? I'm not sure what you mean by do it individually, like paint on each frame. Oh yeah, like you could just click on each frame and make one frame a little bit slower than the others. Yeah, I just put them all the same time, yeah. So I've selected the top layer in my layer panel, and now I'm gonna hit Command J. And now, as you can see, I have layer 1 copy, and I'm going to turn my eyeball on that layer. So if I were to play my animation at this point, it would look like a still photo because my layer 1 copy has now been applied to all the frames. Now what I have to do is I have to cut a hole in this top layer. And we know how to do that now because we know masking from DES 104, week 3. So I select the layer that I want to mask. And I click on the square with the circle inside of it at the bottom of the layer panel. That applies the mask. Now I select my brush tool. I hit the letter X so that I'm painting with black. And what the hole I'm going to cut is around the dog's head. I'm going to see if that works. Sometimes we cut a hole and it ends up being in the wrong place and we have to adjust it later. It's kind of a little trial and error. Let me see if this works. So now I'm going to play the animation. Okay. So you can see the photo is still. There's a little jiggle in the top part of like the sofa she's on. Sometimes there's always going to be like little imperfections that you just kind of have to live with. But I'm going to see if I can fix that. And again, I'm going to hold down the shift button, select all these layers. And I'm going to try and kind of paint back any part where the sofa seems to be jiggling. Let's see if that fixes it. Oh, I got a little, do you see the little piece of her ear that stayed in? And also her nose gets cut off because I brought it in too far. So now I'm gonna, again, you have to make sure every time you adjust this, you have to select all the layers. Fix your hole. And let's see. Oh, there is a little jiggle. But I think it's good enough. Okay, let's make the actual GIF part of this now. So we have our animation. It's playing. And now we're going to turn this into the animated GIF that we'll submit for grading. So you go File, Export, Save for Web. And I would recommend writing on your notes how to turn the animated GIF into a GIF. How to turn the animated GIF into a GIF. And so step one is you go to File, Export, Save for Web. Make sure GIF is selected at the top of the screen. And I think it says here that we want to make sure that our animated GIF is less than 800 kilobytes. So you can find out the size of your animated GIF by looking down here in this corner. And if your size is a little bit on the large side, you can change your settings. So you can use like a restrictive setting and change it from diffusion to no dither. And as you can see, it can start to look a little bit rough. That's at 1K, 10K. Adaptive. There, now it's down to 500. Selective. And perceptual. And if you use diffusion, it makes it go higher. Okay. Also, make sure that after you select GIF here, where it says animation looping options, make sure those are set on forever. And then you're going to hit save. Now I'm going to make a folder on my desktop for des323 schoolwork. And I'll call this animated. You guys will name this des323 underscore week1 underscore your name. And it's really important, especially for animated GIFs, because animated GIFs are going to be used on the internet. You share them on social media and stuff, right? So it's important for your animated GIF to not have any spaces in your file name. Don't accidentally put extra periods or commas or exclamation points. And don't put special characters. And then you're going to hit save. Now let's see our animated GIF in action. So I'm going to go on my desktop and I'm going to find my des323 folder. Click, as you can see, if you preview it, you can see the preview of the animation here. Yeah, there's a little jiggle. It's okay. A little jiggle is okay. As long as we're not cutting off her nose or anything like that. And that's how it looks on the internet. Okay. Now, I believe you're also asked to add additional effects to your animated GIF, such as using adjustment layers. No, it doesn't specifically say that, but I'm going to show you that you can add a little bit of fanciness to this using adjustment layers, just to help make it look a little bit fancy, a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is, again, every time you make an adjustment to your animation, you have to select all the frames. So that way, what you're adding is affecting all the frames. So I'm going to hold down the Shift button, select all my frames. Then I'm going to go over here to the Layers panel, click on the adjustment layer icon, that circle that's light on one side, dark on the other. And I'm going to select, let's do hue saturation. And I want to do something that's just a little, let's do a little colorize. Something a little pretty, a little blue. And I think I want to put it on like a blending mode or something too. So I could put it on overlay, soft light. I like this sort of old yellowy look. Do hard light, but I'll just do a little bit of lower opacity. Okay. So now I've kind of added this. So that's the before, and this is the after. I added this sort of like sunset-y filter to it, right? And now I'll go File, Export, Save for Web. GIF, it's the same size still. Save, and I'll just call this demo. Let's see what this one looks like. I like this sort of sepia tone look. Okay. So that's your assignment this week, and I want to show you what some professional animated GIFs look like, and some professional, and these are what we call cinemagraphs. By the way, does anyone have any questions on anything that I've done before, done on this, or want me to demonstrate anything again? Anyone have any questions?
Can you do the adjustments and use that during the assignment, or do you want just the plain?
Oh yeah, you are more than welcome to add any special adjustments to it, like, adjustment layers to adjust the color. Anything fancy that you want to do to it is totally fine.
Okay, awesome.
Cool. So let's take a look at some professional animated GIFs and cinemagraphs.
GIFs were established as a free and sort of like usable part of the web.
GIFs are great because it's a low barrier of entry. Anybody can play around and it's fun.
The animated GIF for us was just a photograph that could move and existed forever.
This is a photograph that is still alive, and so we were already thinking beyond the limitations of the file name.
An animated GIF is an image that's been encoded using the graphics interchange format, where it has multiple frames encoded into a single image file, and a web browser or other piece of software will play those images back in animated sequence automatically. The original GIF specification came out in 1987. Early example of GIFs that you see are flames. Like, flames are very popular, and the waving American flag is all over the place. Most notoriously is the under construction GIF. But then by the time you get to like 95, 96, you've got the release of the Netscape browser and these web browsers that can automatically animate them. And all of a sudden you see this new spike in popularity. But following that, there's this sudden division between the Web 1.0 of the 70s and 80s and 90s, and then Web 2.0 of like the 2000s moving forward. So the idea of using GIFs becomes way less fashionable. But around 2007, 2008, popularity is swinging back up. People start to realize that you can use GIFs for tons of different things. Like, now that we're in 2011, 2012, there's more GIFs online, but you also have way more places to put them. Things like Reddit and Tumblr, WordPress, even like Twitter to a certain degree. So you're seeing actually this like postmodern GIFs. And the tools for GIF creation are becoming more widespread.
GIFs can be anything, but what unites the GIFs is that they're short and they are something that most Tumblr users can create themselves. People are sharing more, and I think Tumblr definitely has a part of that. Humans really like repetition. We feel comfortable with it. And sometimes just the longer you watch something, the funnier it gets, or it'll actually change meanings. You have the glitch art, you have pixel art, TV, movies, and you have stuff that you can't even really categorize. I think it's mostly young people driving the form, definitely, because it enhances their online persona. Just being able to make some of those makes you so cool. It's uncharted territory right now. And I think really anything has the possibility, the potential of being an art form. But certainly around animated GIFs, we've seen a transformation. We've seen them go from just people taking TV shows. We've seen people making original stuff with them. Mashups between video games and movie characters and even Tumblr memes. I think there's other new art forms waiting to be discovered in there that we just haven't figured out yet.
So we were doing fashion editorials, and that's all in magazines and things like that. And the fashion world really didn't latch on to the internet. So we wanted to push that.
It makes sense that the web is there. Why put a still picture online? The image can now move.
So instead of making still pictures, you would make animated pictures, and they would just go on infinitely forever.
Everyone always describes our work as creepy.
What's creepy about it?
But our work is very playful. So, I mean, I think the two biggest inspirations is, one, the web. We work off of memes, and memes are in our work.
They're just a kid making something funny with their friend and tossing it up online because they can.
That's where the best memes come from, you know?
Yeah.
It's accidents. But besides that, video games.
It lends itself to like video game culture, like playing a game and, you know, blowing people up on the moon and slaying dragons and things like that. It's just this idea that you could be anything and
you can become
go
anyone.
anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, these are possible in games.
We get bored really, really quick. And it's always about doing the next thing in technology. And it used to be that art was in museums on walls. And now all of a sudden with this thing of the web and art on screens, all of a sudden you go to the MoMA and there's a screen with art on it. So we just want to be there.
I think there's opportunities with this kind of hybrid medium to show people something they've never seen before, to have these moments that can just exist forever.
It's like this little magical warp of time. We could live within a moment within that moment, like to dream of something and then create it in a camera and share it with people and let them dream with you just for a moment.
It allows a moment to live on, and there's something kind of fascinating about that.
Whatever that one thing is that is alive is what your eye's gonna go to. It sets the emotional impact of what the cinematograph will be.
It's a big creative decision for us, like what moment to focus on.
We have a cinematograph called Anna Sees Everything. She's watching the show and it's kind of like a little portrait of her. This is what she does for a living.
So like watching the footage of Bill Cunningham, he doesn't take a picture of every model that walks by.
When he likes something, he likes it and he shoots it. When he doesn't, he doesn't, and he doesn't even think about it.
So like we get to learn something, and watching somebody for hours on end while we work on it, we understand them.
It's so voyeuristic. You look, then you feel like you should look away, but then you can watch it, and so then you can watch it some more, and it's like, oh.
The simplicity of it, I feel, is really beautiful, and we see it as an evolution of photography. If you think of all the ways that photography is displayed, these are areas that we want to go into.
There's little parts of it that are alive, and you can choose to engage in depth into the art, or you can choose to just glance at it and it's there as if it's a photograph.
And it's essentially something you've never seen before.
Who are those people for whom like they think in GIFs or like they almost speak in GIFs? And I think once you get to that point, yeah, like sure, it's art.
The ideal of art has changed.
And we've always seen what we can get away with. It's fun.
When we started making these, we were calling them animated GIFs, but it was so much more than that.
It's just too new, and I love being a part of this at a time when we're just figuring it out.
Okay, so see how artful animated GIFs can be, and they're really captivating. I'm just going to show one more really short clip of some really just fantastic, simple, everyday animated GIFs that are really cute. Okay, so have a look. These are some of the best. I think this was of the month. 2016. Okay, so now we are thoroughly inspired. I want to make sure that you guys all have the answers and the information that you need to succeed on your assessment this week. So these are some of the things that will be covered in the assessment. The different compositing tools. So review the different ways that you can make selections. And if we still have time at the end of class, I'll go over these, but I think some of these are pretty basic and you should know them by now from DES 104, but definitely drop into my emails and text messages if you're confused about any of these. So your basic selection tools like the lasso tool and the marquee tool. The quick mask, which you learned in DES 104, this is when you painted a red mask, a red transparent mask on your subject prior to making the selection. The pen tool, which is really great for making smooth curves and straight lines. The custom shape tool, which can be turned into a selection, and I'll be happy to devote some time today or Friday to demonstrating that. The color range selector, which is a way to make a selection based on the color of an object. And the channel pull. I mean, these are all the compositing techniques that we have to use when we're making masks. Now, inside the mask's properties window, you can adjust some things like feathering and density and the edge of the mask. And actually, I think this is a good spot to demonstrate. Let's open up a new project. So the mask's properties window. Grab my flower, there we go. This one's a good example. Okay. Go away, timeline. So let's say we used that quick selection tool to select the subject. And it didn't do a good job, so we have to add to selection. And we have to tell this, no, no, select all this stuff. Select that petal, and that petal. There we go. So now we have our selection. And now we make our layer mask by clicking on the square with the circle inside of it at the bottom of the layer panel. And we get this really ugly, jagged, pixelated edge. The mask's properties window is where we can clean up that edge. So if you double click on the layer mask, here is the mask's properties window. Now the very basic mask properties window function is feathering. And we did this when in week 2 of DES 104, when we colorized Harley's lips, and we used feathering to soften the edge. As you can see, feathering here softens the edge. And so inside the mask's properties window, you can adjust feathering and density. Density will add more gray to your mask. So instead of your mask being on a black background, it's on a gray background, so you can semi-transparently see the background through it. That's what density does. Now inside the select and mask button here, you have more options. And these options include smoothing out the edge and shifting the edge. So let's watch, see that's smoothing out the edge. Shifting the edge will involve cutting inward a little bit more, increasing our contrast a little bit more. So contrast, smoothing, shifting the edge, there's even a feathering option, are all things that we can do here. I'll click OK. And as you can see, making those adjustments help to smoothen out the edge on the petals there, right? So you will be asked in your assessment this week about what options are in the feather and density masks property, or what options are in the masks properties window, I should say. And inside the masks properties window, you'll need to know that feather and density is in there. And the way that you access the mask properties window is simply by double clicking on the layer mask, and then the mask properties window will pop up, okay? And then the mask edge tool allows you to refine that edge, smoothing and contrast and shifting the edge. So on your quiz this week, you'll also be asked, what tools can you use inside of a layer mask? And there's a lot. You can smudge that layer mask. You can paint with your brush inside that layer mask. You can blur it with the blur tool. You can use adjustment layers like contrast, or adjustment tools, I should say, like contrast or threshold. And you can toggle the foreground and background color of your brush by hitting the letter X. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. So in order to adjust your mask, you can double click on the layer mask icon, and that brings up the mask properties window where you can adjust density and feathering. And then if you want to refine that edge of that mask more, you click on select and mask, and that is where you can do smoothing, feathering, contrast, shifting the edge, etc. Now you can also paint directly inside the layer mask by using, like I said, your paintbrush. See, I can paint. And then I can paint like this. I'm using my brush tool, and I'm using X to toggle. I can also use like where's my smudge tool? There he is. I can also use my smudge tool. Do effects like this. And I can also use my blur tool. Where's my blur tool? It's been a while since I used my blur tool. Why am I not? Oh, it's on the same button as the smudge tool. So if you're like me, and it's been a while since you used the blur tool, it's on the same button as your smudge tool. So the blur tool, there you go. You can blur things like that. And that's all inside the layer mask. And when I option click, that's how I can see inside my layer mask. And that's what I'm seeing there. So that way, the image isn't being smudged. It's the mask that's being smudged. And these are all questions that will be on your quiz this week. So to see inside the layer mask, do just what I did. Hold down the Option button if you're on a Mac, the Alt button if you're on a PC, and click. And now I can see inside the layer mask and what it looks like. To invert a layer mask, you can hit Command I or Control I if you're on a PC. And that's what inverting a layer mask looks like. It's like everything that was on the outside is now on the inside. Command I, Command I. So see how that works? Now, it's important to understand the difference between inverting a selection and inverting a mask. Okay, let me get rid of this completely. Okay, so let's say we have our selection of our object. And let's say we want to invert that selection because we only want to cut out the background. Or we only want to cut out the subject. That's what I meant to say. We only want to cut out the subject. You can hit Shift-Command-I to invert your selection. And then you can click on the square with the circle inside of it at the bottom of the layer panel to make your mask. And see, by inverting the selection, now we've only cut out the flower. Now, if we wanted to invert our mask, just click on the mask layer and then hit Command-I. So you can both invert a selection and invert a mask. Shift-Command-I to invert a selection, Command-I to invert a mask. And let's say you have a selection, but you want to move on to something else and you don't want that selection anymore. Let's say you've decided, okay, I have this selection and you want to paint on the background. And so you can't paint, you can only paint on the flower that's inside the selection. You can't paint on the background. So if you want to paint on the background, you have to delete the selection by hitting Command-D. And then see, now I can paint on the background, like so. Okay, many different objects in your career as a graphic designer will need to be cut out of their background. You're gonna have animals that you need to cut out of their background that have furry, irregular shapes, organic shapes. You're gonna have objects that are smooth curves and straight lines. You're gonna have objects that have straight lines only. You're gonna have objects on solid colored backgrounds, objects on light backgrounds. You're gonna have objects that are perfectly circular and perfectly regular. So these are all the types of objects that someone is going to need to cut out. And here's some tips. If you're cutting something out that is organic, hey, you guys, was I gone for long? I literally just saw that I got kicked out of the meeting and then suddenly I'm back and I'm not quite sure what happened. So a lot of people have been using Zoom lately, so Zoom has been having some glitches. So what was I talking about when I got kicked off? Was I talking about organic irregular shapes? Yeah. So if you're masking something that is going to be bumpy and lumpy and furry, you're probably going to want to use the quick mask or the quick selection tool, which allows you to use a paintbrush to paint that selection. Okay, quick mask or quick selection tool. Now, if you have something that is smooth curves and straight lines, you're probably going to want to use the pen tool, right? Because a pen tool is great for making selections that have smooth curves and straight lines. And if you are making a selection or a mask on an object that has straight lines only, think back to DES 104, week 3, I mean. Remember that little wand, that little fairy wand with the star on it? We use the polygon lasso tool to cut that out. So the polygon lasso tool is a great tool to use for objects that have straight edges only. Now, if an object is on a solid colored background, you know, it'd be a great idea to use the color range selector to cut that object down. That's a type of tool that we haven't talked about much yet. So I'm gonna, you know, definitely talk about that. And then if you have an object that's on a light background or a very dark background, you're gonna use the channel pole, which is also something that we haven't really talked about yet, but I'll definitely be demonstrating it. And if you have something that's perfectly circular or perfectly square and regular, you're gonna wanna use your marquee tools, like your elliptical marquee or your rectangular marquee. Now, clipping masks are something that we remember from DES 104. It's how you do your shading, right? How we were able to apply shading to our different layers. And we can do all sorts of things. We can put clipping masks on, we can put layer masks on clipped layers. We can use it for textures. We can use it for adjustment layers, etc. So let's take a look and look at how we can use clipping masks on our projects. Okay, so I'm going to temporarily turn this layer off. I'm going to click on the background. I'm going to go to my shape tool. Find a nice little heart. There we go. There we go. Okay, so we have the shape, and the way that we can clip a picture into the shape is by putting a picture layer above the shape and then clipping it. And the way we make a clipping mask is we put our cursor on the line between the picture layer and the shape layer. So my cursor, the finger of my cursor is on the line between the picture layer and the shape layer. And I hold down the Option button and I click. And now I want to see more of that flower. There we go. This is looking nice. So now I have a photo inside this shape. And we can continue to clip things inside of this shape. For instance, make a new layer. Remember what we did with our clipping masks in DES 104? We were painting shading, right? And then we clipped our shading by holding down the Option button, putting our cursor on the line between the top layer and the bottom layer, and then clicking. And now we have our shading inside of our shape using a clipping mask. And right now my blending mode is on normal. I can change my blending mode to something like color, right? Got changed to luminosity. Let's do color, right? So I can paint this however I want. I can do 2 colors if I want, right? And I can be really messy. I don't have to feel like I have to be super perfect. I can paint as messy as I want because it's all clipped inside that heart layer. I can also clip adjustment layers to this. So I can go to the circle that's light on one side, dark on the other at the bottom of the layer panel. I can click on hue saturation. And if I adjust the hue saturation without clipping it, as you can see, the whole document gets changed. But if I clip the hue saturation layer to the heart layer, the only thing that changes in the document will be this one heart that this is clipped to. Does anyone have any questions about that? Because that's kind of an important concept, but a lot of people get confused about clipping masks. But it's pretty straightforward. The way that you put a clipping mask into a shape is simply by hovering your cursor on the line between the shape and the picture, holding down the option button and clicking, holding down the option button and clicking, holding down the option button and clicking. Now you can have masks inside your clipping mask. And so that might be a question that you get on the quiz as well. Can you have masks inside your clipping mask? Yes, as you can see, there's a layer mask here on this hue saturation adjustment layer. And I can go ahead and use my paintbrush tool and I can paint, 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 paint. And see, there you go, option click, that's my layer mask. So we know how to make clipping masks now. We know how to put a mask on a clip layer. And we know what can be clipped. We can clip textures, photos, adjustment layers, anything that you want. Now we can't clip filters. Remember, filters are things that we can use to distort an image, right? I can go up to filter, let's do distort, twirl. Right, so I have that filter, but a filter actually needs to be on a specific layer. So you can't necessarily clip a filter to a layer. The filter has to actually be on that layer. Now, let's use a little bit of deductive reasoning and a little bit of kind of critical thinking skills. What would happen if you're painting a mask on an object and you use either a gray brush or a brush that's like 50% opacity instead of 100% black? What will happen if you're painting with gray or even another color or like 50% opacity? Now this is going to be a question on your quiz. And the answer is, if you are painting a mask and you're using gray or 50% opacity, it will be a semi-transparent mask. So it won't be a hard mask where you have let's mask this. So instead of putting black, I'm going to select gray color. And see, instead of painting this mask pure black and white, it's going to be semi-transparent, so I'll still be able to see the background. Whereas if I have pure black and I paint the mask, I am completely erasing the background. Now, for your quiz, you'll want to know that the Refine Edge dialog box allows you to fix the mask if you have little stray hairs or flares or other little details that might get cut off, right? And you want to bring them back in. So the Refine Edge dialog box is great for that. Let me see if I have a good picture to use as an example. Oh gosh, my example is not here. Let's use you. Okay. So let's say we do, this might not be the best example. So this is a great demonstration to do if you have like a subject that has like curly hair. So on Friday, I'll make sure I have a good picture of a subject that has like curly hair. So what you do is, say we select our subject, see if it wants to select our subject. There we go, it did. We make our mask. We double click on our mask and we go to select and mask. And I want to see what she looks like on white background. And I want to make sure if there's any little hairs, any little stray hairs that are floating around, I want to be able to see them. So I'm going to turn on Smart Radius. And then I'm going to paint around her hair here with this brush that gives us. And Smart Radius will allow us to bring those little hairs back into the selection. And mine is being difficult. There we go. I was using the wrong brush, that's why. I was adding more to the selection. It's this brush that has the little like hair, the Refine Edge brush tool. I was like, why is it giving me my whole background? So we use the little Refine brush tool there to bring back the little stray hairs around the selection, and it helps to make it look a little bit more natural because you get all those little stray hairs and stuff. Then click OK. And then I have to go back and fix my little part here. There we go. But you'll do more with that. We'll do more with that a little bit later. We'll spend a lot of time on that in week 3. But know for the purpose of your quiz that you use the Refine Edge dialog box to fix the mask and the selection around the little hairs and other details. You can bring those hairs and details back into your selection. Vector masks. So vector masks are whenever you use a vector tool to create a mask, right? So we use vector masks a lot when we're using our shape tools, right? When we draw our shape on the shape layer, it creates a vector mask automatically. And a vector mask has this blue line around it, which is the path. Often this properties window pops up and we can adjust the colors like so. And we can adjust the other settings like so, like add little strokes and other details here, right? And so the vector mask shows up on the layer looking like that, right? So vector mask is when you use the vector tools to create a mask. You can use the custom shape tools to mask your image as well. So if I go down to the bottom of the tool panel, and let's see, I'll click on like my custom shape tool. And instead of being on the shape layer, I'm going to be on the path option. Select a different shape. Let's do a little butterfly. How about that? Now I'm on the path option. I can click and drag at a diagonal angle. And there is my path, my outline of my butterfly shape. If I go up to make selection up at the top of the screen, that turns that custom shape into a selection. And then from there, I can turn that selection into a mask by going down to the bottom of the layer panel and clicking on the square with the circle inside of it. Ta-da! So you can make masks from custom shapes. Pasting a photo inside a layer mask. This is a great way to add things like texture, and it can be really, really interesting. So I'm gonna delete this layer mask, and I'm gonna open a texture. I'm going to File, Open. Let's find a good texture. I know I have it. There we go. So what's really important is that your texture be grayscale like this, and then you get your marquee tool out, draw a selection around the area of the texture that you want to paint inside your mask or paste inside your mask. And then you hit Command C, Command C. And now you have your flower layer selected, or whatever layer selected that you want to mask. Then you can go to the bottom of the layer panel and click on the Add a Layer Mask icon. Now your layer mask icon now is blank. There's nothing in it. Option click, and now we are inside that layer mask. And now we can paste a texture in there by going to Command V, clicking Command V or Control V if you're on a PC. Now I'm going to Option click again on my layer mask. And you can see now the texture is inside that picture, and that's why the picture has this really interesting texture now. Command D to deselect. You can also adjust, the quality of this. So I can hit Command L on my layer mask, and I can increase the contrast by moving these sliders around. So now it's like this kind of aged, torn photo. And it's not just white that's being added here. If I put any other color behind here, you can see that we've actually made, we've actually kind of cut into the picture. So pasting a texture inside of a picture is a great way, to add texture to text. Let's say you have text and you want to make that text look really gritty and torn. Get like a text-like impact. Okay, now I'm going to add a layer mask to this text layer. Option click, and now I'm inside the layer mask. And now I'm going to hit Command V to paste. Option click, and now I'm no longer in the layer mask, and now that texture is inside that text. And now I can hit Command L to bring up levels on that layer mask. And I can adjust like so. And now I have this gritty, grungy texture effect. And again, everywhere it's cut away is transparent. So if I put it on a background like this, that's a different color, it kind of looks like it's stamped almost. It's pretty cool. Okay. So I think on Friday I'll have time to discuss how to do color range selector and channel pull. But I think I've kind of thrown a lot of things at you. Hopefully I just kind of covered the things that are going to be on your quiz. A lot of it's self-explanatory and a lot of it's kind of relevant to what you have learned in DES 104, but we'll go over more on Friday. I want to make sure that you guys have time to ask questions. I know there's also a student who needed help with installing Adobe. So if you're that student, I forget who it was, but if you're that student, stick around and I'll help you with your Adobe installation. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
Nope.
Perfect. Well, have a good rest of your evening. Thank you guys so much for participating in our week 1 class session.
I do have a side question. With me, I had to leave for the other class for a little bit.
Oh yeah, no problem.
With the recording, when will that be available for me to rewatch it?
As soon as possible. Sometimes it takes a couple hours to process, but I will be, as soon as it's done processing, it will be up and available. I'm just going to be uploading it as soon as it finishes processing.
And I talked to the other teacher. They moved their class, so it shouldn't be a problem going forward.
Yay!
So I've got my new class for them is being pushed to Mondays and Thursdays.
Perfect.
For that, so I should be just fine with you.
Okay, perfect. Great. Well, just reach out if you need anything else and feel free to text me.
Thanks, Carly.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.